I knew something in my relationship had shifted the night I found myself apologizing for something I didn't even do. It wasn't a big fight or some huge blow-up. It was the quiet way my girlfriend Lena looked at me like I disappointed her just by breathing wrong. That look hit harder than any yelling ever could, because it made me feel small in a way I couldn't explain. Most days back then were simple. I worked at a small neighborhood grocery store, stocking shelves and helping customers carry bags to their cars. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, predictable, and honestly kind of peaceful. I liked that I could clock out and leave the job behind without it eating my brain. When I got home, Lena would usually be on the couch scrolling her phone, half paying attention, half complaining about how exhausting her day was as a barista. I'd make dinner. She'd pick at it. Nothing dramatic, just the routine we'd fallen into. But little comments started creeping in. The first one I remember clearly was when she told me I didn't understand real stress because my job was basically pushing boxes. I laughed it off, even made a joke out of it, but it stung. I brushed it aside because relationships are supposed to take patience, right? Nobody's perfect. I told myself she was just having an off week. Her tone changed slowly, like a faucet dripping one drop at a time. She'd correct the way I folded laundry. She'd sigh when I asked a question. She'd tell stories about her coworkers and somehow twist them into subtle digs at me. Like, even Kyle knows how to be assertive. It was always something tiny, small enough that I felt stupid calling it out. Still, I started feeling tense in my own apartment. Every night I walked in trying to read her mood, trying to figure out whether I'd catch a smile or that disappointed stare that made my stomach knot. It felt like she was evaluating me, grading me. I didn't understand what I was supposedly failing at. Things got worse when she picked up extra shifts. She started coming home irritated about everything, slamming cabinets, throwing her apron on the floor. I'd ask what was wrong, and she'd snap that I wouldn't get it. Sometimes she'd ignore me entirely and scroll her phone like I wasn't even in the room. And when I asked if she wanted help with anything, she told me she was tired of carrying all the weight. That line stuck with me for days because I genuinely thought I was doing everything she asked. I paid most of the rent. I cleaned the apartment. I cooked most nights. But she acted like she was somehow burdened by my existence. I started waking up early just to avoid her morning moods, leaving the apartment before she got up so I wouldn't risk starting her day wrong. The moment that really hit me happened on a random Thursday. I'd come home with her favorite pastry from the bakery near my job. It wasn't anything grand, just a small surprise, something to brighten her day. I set it on the table with a little note. When she got home, she didn't smile. She didn't thank me. She just looked at it and said, "Why would you waste money on this? You always make decisions without thinking." My chest tightened in a way I'd never felt. It wasn't about the pastry. It was the way she made generosity feel like incompetence. That night I lay awake staring at the ceiling, realizing I was scared of the person who claimed to love me. I kept telling myself it was temporary, but the truth was becoming harder to deny. Something inside me whispered that I wasn't imagining the shift. Something was wrong with the way she treated me, and for the first time, I started wondering if the problem wasn't me at all. The turning point didn't come from some giant betrayal. It came from a slow drip of moments that finally pooled into something I couldn't ignore anymore. One Saturday morning, I was cleaning the kitchen while Lena slept in. I wasn't doing anything loud, just rinsing dishes, putting away utensils. She stormed out of the bedroom like I'd personally ruined her life. "Do you have to be so noisy?" she snapped, rubbing her eyes. "You never think about anyone but yourself." I froze mid-rinse. I'd been up for hours. I'd let her sleep. I'd even planned to make breakfast. But the way she said it, like I was selfish for existing, hit me harder than usual. I told her I didn't think I was being loud, and she rolled her eyes like I was some clueless child. "You never listen," she muttered. "It's exhausting." Exhausting. That word again. I felt it sit on my chest like a weight I didn't ask for. Over the next week, her reactions got sharper. If I asked how her day was, she sighed like I was interrogating her. If I didn't ask, she accused me of being distant. There was no winning. I walked on eggshells in my own damn home, tiptoeing around someone who used to cuddle into me on the couch for no reason. Then came the favor. She wanted me to cover her portion of the rent for the month because she'd been too stressed to manage her schedule and missed a couple shifts. I said I could handle it once, but asked if she could tell me a bit earlier next time. That's all. Just basic communication. She exploded. You're always keeping score. I can't depend on you for anything. I stood there speechless, holding the envelope with the rent money. She twisted everything into an attack, even when I agreed to help. And the more I gave, the more she acted like I owed her. A few nights later, things got clearer, painfully clearer. We were sitting on the couch, and she was scrolling her phone with that annoyed frown she'd been wearing for weeks. I asked if something was wrong, and she said, I just wish you acted like an adult sometimes. I asked what she meant. She didn't answer. Instead, she said, other people actually step up. They have ambition. They go after things. You're just you. The way she said you felt like she was scraping something off her shoe. I walked to the bedroom without a word. For the first time since we'd started dating, I didn't feel hurt. I felt angry. Not yelling angry, not dramatic angry, just done. Done being talked down to. Done being treated like a burden for wanting a peaceful life. Done carrying a relationship she wasn't even trying to respect. That night I replayed the last few months in my head. All the little digs, all the mood swings, all the ways she made me feel like I was failing some test she never explained. And as I lay there in the dark, something clicked in a way I didn't see coming. She wasn't overwhelmed. She wasn't stressed. She was using me as her emotional punching bag, and I let her. The realization hit like cold air. Every insult, every eye roll, every moment she made me feel small, none of it was random. She needed someone to blame for her own unhappiness, and I was the closest, safest target. That was the moment something inside me hardened. Not in a bitter way, not in a dramatic I'll show her way, but in a calm, steady way. If she wanted to keep treating me like the problem, then fine. I'd stop being the solution. I'd stop fixing things. I'd stop carrying the weight she refused to lift. I'd stop giving her the version of me she took for granted. That's when the plan started forming. Not revenge out of anger. Revenge out of clarity. Quiet, measured, and completely on my terms. Once the anger settled into something steady, I realized the best revenge wasn't yelling, arguing, or trying to win. It was stepping back and letting her own behavior expose itself. Lena thrived on control, on me reacting, apologizing, fixing things. So the first step was simple. I stopped feeding the dynamic. I didn't confront her. I didn't announce anything. I just quietly shifted. When she made a snide comment, I didn't defend myself. I'd nod, say all right, and go back to what I was doing. When she sighed dramatically, waiting for me to ask what was wrong, I didn't bite. I treated her moods like weather, something that existed without needing to involve me. At first, she didn't notice, but after a few days, the pattern broke, and she started poking harder. You're being weird, she said one evening as I chopped vegetables for dinner. I'm just tired, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Well, you don't have to act like a robot. I didn't answer. I let the silence sit. That alone irritated her more than any argument would have. Meanwhile, I quietly prepared the parts she'd never expect. I gathered every text she'd sent me, every insult, every time she belittled me, every accusation she'd twisted. I screenshotted messages where she admitted skipping shifts, blowing money, or ignoring responsibilities. I didn't need them for some explosive confrontation. I needed them for clarity, for myself, for whatever came next. Then I started organizing my exit in the background. I talked to my coworker Mike about taking on a little extra work. He was happy to give me more hours. I opened a separate account at the credit union near my job and moved a small amount of money each week. Nothing dramatic, nothing she'd notice. Just enough to build a cushion. Most importantly, I stopped covering for her. She asked me to call her in sick for work. I told her she needed to do it herself. She wanted me to pay for groceries because she'd forgotten again. I bought only what I needed. She wanted me to clean the apartment before her friends came over. I said I was heading out and left. Every time she pushed, I stepped aside instead of bending. And every time I didn't give her the reaction she expected, she got more frustrated. What's your problem lately? She asked one night. Nothing, I said. Just keeping to myself. Well, you're being distant. I'm giving you space, I replied calmly. She hated that answer. She couldn't flip it into an argument. She couldn't guilt me with it. It was neutral, factual, and perfectly reasonable. While she stewed in confusion, I kept preparing. I found a cheap room for rent a few blocks from my job. Nothing fancy, but clean and quiet. The landlord agreed to hold it for 2 weeks. I slowly packed small things into my backpack during my morning shifts, storing them in my locker. Clothes, toiletries, the sentimental stuff she didn't care about. Everything else could stay. I didn't need a dramatic exit with boxes and yelling. The final piece of the plan was timing. I waited for payday, hers and mine. She always spent her check the same day and relied on me to cover the rest. But this time, I'd already moved my money, and I knew she was counting on me for the rent again. When she asked, "Hey, can you cover rent this month? I'm short." I played it calm. "How short?" I asked. She shrugged. "All of it, basically. I had a rough week." In the past, I would have felt guilty. I would have stretched myself thin to help. This time I said, "I can't. I already used my money for other things." Her face twisted. "Are you kidding me? You know I'm stressed. You know I'm struggling. You're really going to be selfish right now?" I didn't argue. I didn't defend. I simply said, "I'm not able to help this month." The silence that followed was thick and ugly, but I didn't fill it. She stormed around the apartment, slamming things, muttering under her breath. But it didn't touch me the way it used to. I already knew I wasn't staying. That night she went to bed angry, convinced her guilt trip would wear me down. Instead, I sat in the living room, calm and quiet, knowing exactly what I'd do the next morning. My exit wasn't going to be loud. It was going to be clean, precise, and absolutely impossible for her to twist. Because the best revenge wasn't proving her wrong. It was removing myself entirely from the role she'd built around me. I woke up before sunrise the next morning, the apartment still and quiet. Lena was asleep, cocooned in blankets like nothing in the world could touch her. I stood there for a moment, half expecting some last-minute guilt to crawl up my spine. But all I felt was a calm I hadn't known in months. I grabbed the last two things I owned there, my jacket and the small notebook I kept next to the bed. Everything else was packed away in my locker at work or already moved to the room I'd rented. I didn't leave a note. Notes invite arguments, explanations, drama. I was done giving her chances to twist my words. I locked the door softly behind me and walked out into the cool morning air. No shaking hands, no hesitation, just relief. At work, I put in a full shift like any other day. When I clocked out, I walked to my new place, a simple room with a narrow bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out over a quiet street. It wasn't much, but it felt like oxygen. I set my bag down and sat on the bed, letting the silence settle around me. No tension, no sharp words waiting for me, no guessing games. Around 6 that evening, my phone started blowing up. First call, ignored. Second call, ignored. Then came the text. "Where are you? Did you seriously leave? This isn't funny. You're being dramatic. You're abandoning me. You're ruining everything." The shift from confusion to blame to desperation was quick. Too quick. It confirmed everything I'd already figured out. She didn't miss me. She missed the convenience of me. I didn't respond. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because explanations never mattered with her anyway. My silence wasn't revenge. It was closure. By the next morning, the messages changed tone. "You blindsided me. You made me act like that. You should have told me you were unhappy. You're the reason this relationship failed." That one made me pause. Not out of guilt, but because I felt absolutely nothing while reading it. No anger, no sadness, just clarity. If she truly believed that, then leaving was the smartest thing I'd ever done. A few days later, I got a message from her coworker, Jess. We weren't friends, just familiar faces from picking Lena up after shifts. She wrote, "Not my business, but Lena's been telling everyone you abandoned her for no reason. People saw the text she sent you. They know what really happened. Just thought you should know." I didn't ask who shared them. I didn't need to. Lena must have shown her phone to someone looking for sympathy, forgetting she'd filled it with months of put-downs and guilt trips. She dug her own hole long before I walked away. That was the real fallout. Not dramatic, not life-ruining, just natural consequences catching up. People stopped buying her stress story. Her friends pulled back. Her manager cut her slack less often. Not because of me, but because she'd finally run out of people to blame. As for me, life settled into something simple again. My new routine was quiet. I worked my shifts, saved my money, cooked for myself without judgment hovering over my shoulder. I slept better. I laughed more at work. I remembered what it felt like to breathe normally. It didn't take long to realize the moral of the whole mess wasn't deep or profound. Sometimes revenge isn't about payback. Sometimes it's just about removing yourself from a place where someone benefits from dimming your light. Lena didn't implode. Her life didn't fall apart. She didn't beg for forgiveness. Real life isn't a movie. People like her just face the natural weight of their own behavior when the person propping them up steps out of the way. And me? I walked away with something she never could have given me. Peace. The quiet kind. The steady kind. The kind you earn by choosing yourself when someone else refuses to.